Have you ever had one of those moments where your own mind just feels like it's actively working against you?
Oh, absolutely.
Like there's this hidden programming running in the background deciding exactly what you're going to stress about today or why you react so defensively to, just a simple piece of feedback or why you're suddenly totally paralyzed by the fear of failing.
A very universal feeling.
It really is. So today, we're exploring a set of sources that essentially act as a manual to break that exact programming. We're looking at the Four Agreements. It's a foundational framework rooted in ancient Toltec wisdom. And the mission for our conversation today, for this deep dive, is to figure out how to use these four specific agreements as a mental hack.
Right.
The goal is pretty massive. We want to break out of this internal hell we might not even realize we're trapped in and actually create some real personal freedom for ourselves.
It's a fascinating framework to dig into. And to really grasp the weight of these agreements, we have to look at where this wisdom originates.
Yeah, set the stage for us.
So, thousands of years ago in southern Mexico, the Toltec weren't just a demographic or a race. They were essentially a society of scientists and artists who were entirely dedicated to conserving and exploring spiritual knowledge. And they had this beautiful, really foundational premise about human perception. They believed that all of existence is quite literally light perceiving light.
Okay, I want to pause right there because, that sounds incredibly poetic, but what does light perceiving light actually mean in practical terms for you and me?
Think of it this way. If everything at its core is made of this energy, this pure light and connection, then we are all fundamentally made of the exact same substance.
Right.
But we don't walk around the grocery store seeing each other as pure light or pure connection.
Definitely not.
We walk around judging, fearing, and misunderstanding each other. The Toltec perspective is that we are blinded by a thick fog. They call it smoke.
Smoke.
Exactly. It's the smoke of our societal conditioning that prevents us from seeing the reality of who we actually are.
Right. And that smoke is what the material refers to as the dream of the planet.
Yes.
Because when you were born, you didn't get to choose your language, your religion, or even the basic moral values of your family. You were born into a dream that was already running long before you got here.
Long before.
And the sources use a pretty wild analogy to explain how we adapt to this. They suggest that humans are actually domesticated, exactly like we train a dog or a cat.
It sounds a bit harsh at first, I know, but think about the mechanism. How do you train a puppy?
You give it a treat when it sits.
Right. You use a system of punishment and reward. Our parents, our teachers, society at large, they gave us a reward, usually in the form of attention or praise or, gold stars, when we obeyed their rules. And they punished us, often by withdrawing that attention when we didn't.
And as a kid, being rejected or losing your parents' attention literally feels like a threat to your survival.
You're completely dependent on them.
Right. So over time, we become so afraid of that rejection and so desperate for the reward of being called a good boy or good girl that we start pretending to be what we aren't. We auto-domesticate.
We do the work for them.
Exactly. We eventually stop needing an outside authority to punish us because we have entirely internalized the system.
Exactly. This domestication process installs what the text describes as a massive, rigid book of law right inside our minds.
The book of law.
Yes. And everything written in that book becomes our absolute truth, even if it completely contradicts our actual inner nature. And to keep us in line with this book of law, we basically split our consciousness. We develop an inner judge and an inner victim.
The judge is that voice constantly monitoring everything you do, right? The one that finds you guilty the second you break a rule from that internal book?
Yes. And the victim is the part of you that receives the judgment. It carries the shame, the blame, that heavy feeling of, I am not good enough. What's deeply tragic about this setup, and this is a really profound point from the material, is that humans are the only animals on Earth that pay thousands of times for the exact same mistake.
Thousands of times. How so? Because if a dog pees on the rug, it gets scolded once and then it's over. The dog goes back to wagging its tail and living its life.
But because humans have such powerful associative memories, we don't just move on. You make a mistake, and the judge immediately punishes the victim. You feel terrible.
Right.
But then you remember the mistake the next morning while you're brushing your teeth, and the judge punishes the victim all over again.
Yeah.
You remember it a year later, and you feel the exact same flush of shame. We keep the punishment looping infinitely.
Man, that is exhausting just to think about all those conflicting beliefs, the constant judgment, the looping memories. It creates this state the Toltecs call the mitote. It's spelled M-I-T-O-T-E. It translates roughly to a chaotic marketplace in your mind. Just imagine 1,000 different voices yelling over each other at the exact same time, trying to sell you different fears and judgments, and none of them are speaking the same language.
It's deafening.
That's the mitote. It completely blocks you from figuring out who you actually are.
And quieting that marketplace is exactly why these tools were developed. The first agreement is our starting point. We're warned this is the most important one, but also by far the hardest to master.
Let's hear it.
The agreement is simply this: be impeccable with your word.
Impeccable is a really strong word.
It is. If we look at the Latin roots, peccatus means sin, and the prefix im means without. So it translates literally to without sin. But a sin here isn't defined in the traditional religious sense. A sin is simply anything you do, feel, believe, or say that goes against yourself.
Oh, that is a huge distinction. So being impeccable with your word just means you aren't using your energy against yourself. You are taking responsibility for your actions, but you're dropping the self-judgment and the internal blame.
Precisely. And the reason the word is the focus here is because it's not viewed as just a sound or a written symbol. It's treated as actual magic. Your word is your power to create. It's how you manifest everything in your life.
But because it's magic, it can be entirely misused. There's a comparison made to black magic when words are used to curse, to blame, or to intentionally destroy.
Yes.
To give a really stark historical example, the material points to Adolf Hitler. One man manipulated an entire nation of intelligent people and led them into a devastating global war, using almost nothing but the power of his word. He planted seeds of fear, and the human mind is incredibly fertile ground for those seeds.
And the question we always have to ask ourselves is what kind of seeds we're planting. Are we planting seeds of connection, or are we planting seeds of fear?
To bring this down to a much more everyday level, there's a heartbreaking anecdote that perfectly illustrates how we accidentally cast these spells on the people we love.
It's a tough one.
It is. Imagine a mother. She loves her daughter dearly, but she comes home from work completely exhausted, super stressed, with a splitting migraine, and her little girl is in the living room, happily singing at the top of her lungs, totally wrapped up in her own joy.
But the noise is making the mother's migraine infinitely worse.
Right. And the mother loses her patience. She snaps and yells, "Shut up! You have an ugly voice. Can you just be quiet?" Now, the mother doesn't actually think the kid's voice is ugly. She's just in pain.
Right.
But the daughter believes the spell. She assumes her voice is genuinely terrible. She makes a new agreement with herself right then and there. She stops singing. She becomes shy, afraid to speak up in class. Her entire life trajectory shifts because of one careless sentence from an authority figure.
It's a chilling example of how fragile that internal programming can be. And this leads right into what is considered the absolute worst form of black magic in human society: gossip.
Oh, wow. Gossip.
Yes. If we look at the human mind as a complex computer system, gossip is essentially a highly contagious computer virus.
I really want to explore that virus analogy. How does that actually infect us in practice?
Well, say you're about to take a class with a new instructor. A friend pulls you aside and says, "Watch out for that teacher. They're incredibly arrogant and completely unfair."
Okay.
You have no idea what motivated your friend to say that. Maybe they didn't study and failed the class. Maybe they have a personal bias.
Yeah.
But that infected opinion is now securely lodged in your mind.
It's planted.
Right. When you walk into that classroom, you aren't seeing the teacher clearly. You're viewing them entirely through the poisonous lens of your friend's gossip. Your circuits are clogged.
And then, inevitably, you complain about the teacher to someone else, passing the virus along. But let me challenge this for a second. Isn't a lot of what we call gossip just, I don't know, venting? Like, we need to process our frustrations with our friends, right? How is that black magic?
It's a fair question.
Yeah.
Venting implies you're releasing an emotion to process it, understand it, and move on. Gossip, in this context, is the intentional spreading of an unverified, emotionally charged opinion to recruit others to your viewpoint.
Oh, I see.
You're trying to make someone else see the world through your infected lens. When you're truly impeccable with your word, you don't need to infect others to validate your own feelings.
That makes a lot of sense. So if gossip and the opinions of others are this highly contagious virus, how do you build an antivirus program? How do you shield yourself?
You adopt the second agreement. Don't take anything personally.
Which sounds so simple, but it requires a radical shift in perspective.
It really does.
Because we naturally operate with a high degree of what's called personal importance. It's the assumption that everything happening around us is about us. And the framework argues that this is actually the maximum expression of selfishness.
We have to realize that everyone is living in their own completely separate dream. They're directed by their own unique book of law that we were talking about earlier. They are the director, the producer, and the star of their own mental movie.
And what am I?
You. You were just a minor secondary character in their film.
So if someone walks up to you and calls you stupid, it literally has nothing to do with you.
Exactly. Even if they walk up and call you the most wonderful person on earth, it's still not about you. It is a reflection of their own internal programming, their mood in that exact second, their own unhealed wounds.
There's a line in the material that is so extreme it kind of knocked the wind out of me. It says, even if someone got a gun and shot you in the head, it was nothing personal.
It's an intensely provocative image, but it pushes the concept to its absolute limit to prove the point. The actions of others are born entirely from their own reality, their own dream.
But wait, let's ground this in reality for a second. What if I actually did something wrong?
Okay.
What if I completely dropped the ball on a project at work and my boss is yelling at me? How do I take accountability for my actual mistake without taking the yelling personally?
That is the crucial distinction to make.
Right.
You can acknowledge the factual reality.
Yeah.
You say, yes, I missed the deadline, I made a mistake, and I'll fix the process. That's taking accountability.
Right.
Taking it personally is absorbing the boss's anger, internalizing it, and saying, I am a failure, I am worthless. The boss's decision to yell and demean you, rather than calmly address the error, is about their own inability to manage stress and communicate effectively.
That's their move.
Exactly. That is their movie. Your mistake is yours to fix. Their emotional poison is theirs to keep.
Wow. Okay, that really clarifies it. So if someone tries to hand you emotional poison and you refuse to take it personally, you are literally refusing to eat it. You remain immune, even if you are standing in the middle of a completely toxic environment.
Precisely. And if we can master not taking things personally when people come at us, we have to look at the flip side. What happens when we project our own false beliefs onto other people?
Which is the third agreement. Don't make assumptions. Assumptions are arguably the root of almost all unnecessary drama in human relationships. The cycle is always the same. We make an assumption about someone's motives. We convince ourselves it is the absolute, undeniable truth. We take their behavior personally based on that assumption, and then we react, creating a massive disaster out of thin air.
We do this constantly, especially in romantic relationships. We make this fatal, massive assumption that our partners see life exactly the way we do. We assume they process emotions the way we do. We assume they judge the same things to be important.
We basically expect them to be mind readers. We think, well, if they really love me, they should just know what I need.
Right, I shouldn't have to ask. And when they inevitably fail to meet these completely unvoiced expectations, we feel deeply betrayed. The drama explodes, not because of what they did, but because our internal assumption was shattered.
We give them the silent treatment because they failed a test they didn't even know they were taking.
Exactly.
So what's the cure here? How do we stop this cycle of silent expectations and mind reading?
The cure is courage. It takes immense courage to ask questions instead of silently projecting. If you don't understand someone's motives, ask. If you need something, say it clearly.
The material is pretty uncompromising on this. It basically says we have to stop making the assumption that our love is going to magically change our partners. You have to accept someone exactly as they are right now. And if you cannot accept them, you need to find someone you don't feel the need to change.
It sounds blunt, but it's incredibly freeing. When you stop making assumptions, your communication becomes clear and direct. There's no hidden subtext. And when your communication is clear, your word naturally becomes impeccable. You can see how these agreements all feed into and support each other.
Which sets up the final piece of the puzzle. The fourth agreement is the anchor. It's the physical action that takes the first three and turns them from cool philosophical ideas into deeply ingrained habits.
And that agreement is
Always do your best.
always do your best.
Yeah.
But we need to be very careful with the definition of best here. Your best is not a static, unchanging level of perfection. It fluctuates constantly.
Right. Your absolute best when you've just had 9 hours of sleep, a great cup of coffee, and you're feeling on top of the world is going to look vastly different than your best when you have a fever, you're exhausted, and you're dealing with a family crisis.
Of course.
The goal isn't to hit some objective benchmark of perfection every single day. It's simply to give whatever your maximum capacity is in that specific present moment.
And this is where a lot of high achievers stumble. We fall into the trap of overdoing. We think pushing past our limits is a virtue. But trying to do more than your best is actively harmful.
Yeah.
There's a great story used to illustrate this. A man goes to a Buddhist temple, and asks the resident master, "If I meditate for 4 hours a day, how long will it take me to transcend my suffering?" The master thinks about it and says, "Perhaps 10 years."
So the man, probably thinking like a modern productivity hacker, says, okay, what if I push myself and meditate for 8 hours a day?
And the master replies, "Then perhaps it will take you 20 years.
I love that. Pushing twice as hard doubles the time it takes. Why? Because by forcing it, you burn yourself out. You drain all the joy out of the process, and you entirely miss the point of being alive.
If you consistently push past your limits, you deplete your physical and emotional energy, and you invite immense frustration. But if you simply do your best, no more, no less, you strip the inner judge of all its power.
How so?
When that critical voice tries to make you feel guilty for not accomplishing more, you can honestly reply, "I did my best." There's no hook for the guilt to latch onto.
It changes how you view your daily tasks, too. The material introduces this Indian concept called puja.
Yes, puja.
It's a ritual where people physically bathe and feed idols of their gods as an expression of pure love and devotion. But the idea is that you can make your entire life a puja. Taking your morning shower, cooking dinner, even filling out a seemingly boring spreadsheet at your job. These can all be rituals honoring your life.
The secret is in the attachment to the outcome. When you act merely for the pure joy of taking the action, because you are alive and capable of doing it, you actually enjoy your life. If you're only taking action because you're desperately waiting for a reward, whether that's a paycheck or someone's approval, you will spend your life suffering, just waiting for the weekend to arrive so you can escape.
Okay, so we have our tools. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. But what are we actually doing battle with here? The Toltec perspective frames the inner judge, the victim, and that whole false book of law as a literal parasite living inside our minds.
A parasite.
Yeah, a parasite that survives by feeding off the emotional poison of fear and drama.
To really grasp the severity of what this parasite does to us, we can look at a very visceral analogy. Imagine if every single human on Earth had a highly contagious, highly infected skin disease. Everyone is covered in painful, festering wounds. Because everyone has it, society simply accepts this constant, agonizing pain as normal.
And because even the lightest touch causes absolute agony, people would naturally build massive walls. They would distance themselves constantly just to avoid being bumped or touched.
Exactly. And the argument is that our emotional minds are currently in this exact state. We are covered in infected emotional wounds from years of domestication and the chaotic mitotes. We think the daily pain of anger, jealousy, and fear is just a normal part of the human experience.
But it isn't.
No, it's a sickness. And to cure it, we need a scalpel to open those wounds and drain the emotional poison.
And that scalpel is forgiveness, which, let's be honest, is so much easier said than done.
It is incredibly difficult. But you don't forgive people because they necessarily deserve your forgiveness. You forgive them because you love yourself too much to keep paying for the injustice. You cut the cord so the poison stops flowing into your system. And ultimately, that scalpel has to be used to forgive yourself for all the times you judged yourself for falling short.
To reach the ultimate level of freedom from this parasite, there's a Toltec concept called the initiation of the dead. Now, the first time I read that, it sounded incredibly dark, embracing the angel of death. What does that actually look like in practice?
It sounds esoteric, but it's a profound psychological tool.
Yeah.
It is the practice of surrendering to the reality that you could die tomorrow. Not in a morbid, fearful way, but as a clarifying lens. If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, would you spend today arguing with your partner over something trivial? Would you spend it worrying about what a stranger thinks of your outfit?
Definitely not. All of that stuff just instantly evaporates.
Right. By embracing that perspective, the parasite, your ego, your heavy attachments to the past, your obsessive fears about the future, symbolically dies. It starves to death because you refuse to feed it your energy. But the beautiful part is that your physical body gets to live on.
You're reborn, in a way.
You get to wake up tomorrow morning completely free. You get to interact with the world with the wild, uninhibited joy of a toddler, but equipped with the wisdom and agency of an adult.
That is such a powerful reframing. Looking back at the Toltec wisdom we've explored today, it really paints a clear picture. We are born into a pre-programmed dream, domesticated by rules we didn't choose, and weighed down by a parasite of fear and judgment. But once we actually see the smoke, we have the choice to rebel. We can use these 4 agreements to systematically rewrite our own book of law, turning an internal nightmare into something resembling heaven on earth.
And as you begin this process, it's vital to offer yourself grace. The old programming has been running for decades. It's incredibly strong. Falling back into old habits is not a failure. It's just part of the process. If you catch yourself gossiping today or you realize you took an email way too personally, simply refuse to let the inner judge turn you into a victim.
Just reset.
Acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
Say, I will start again and move forward. Repetition is how you master the new programming.
It is an ongoing practice for sure. As we finish exploring these sources today, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative image. 3,000 years ago, the human who first realized that everything in existence is made of light also realized that we are all simply mirrors for one another. He gave himself a specific name, the smoky mirror.
The smoky mirror.
He understood that the smoke of our human dream, the heavy layers of our judgments, our false assumptions, and our societal domestication keeps us from recognizing ourselves in each other's eyes. So, as you walk through your day tomorrow, I want to challenge you. When you look at a stranger on the train or a close friend or even someone you consider an enemy, are you truly seeing them? Or are you just looking at your own reflection, completely lost in the smoke? Something to chew on. We'll talk to you next time.